My name is Father Samuel Hauser. I'm retired and I live in residence here at St. Margaret Mary Church. I made the men's Cursillo at Trinity Spiritual Center. I never remember the number, 67 or 78 or something like that. And was it Decora? Is that the word used now? Is that right?
Decoloris.
Decora, the table.
The table.
Decora.
Decora, table.
St. Thomas. Who wants to go to heaven? Who wants to go today?
Hey, you promise? I'll go.
Typically when you ask that second question, the hands are not up as readily. In theory, yes, but in reality, we tend to hesitate on that. Kind of well-rooted in this present world and environment, and lots of plans, lots of things that we have to do and take care of, and people and responsibilities and so forth. So it kind of gives us a bit of a reality check in the sense of where we are in our relationship with Jesus Christ and his body, the church, and our desire for union with him. Chapter 7 poses the third question. Who does Jesus say that you are, that I am? We know who he says he is, and if we acknowledge and recognize that he speaks the truth about himself, that he's the Messiah, that he's the Son of God, that he's the fulfillment of the Old Testament, of the law and the prophets, then it would seem that our lives would live that out, that would be a daily process for us, living that out on a very radical kind of basis. He was very forthright when people asked him, "Who are you?" "I am." Didn't hesitate. He was confident. He was assured of who he was and what he was all about. They weren't. Their anticipation of the expectation of the Messiah was very different than the way he came. They were expecting someone to come in fiery chariot kind of style and make everything right and free them from all oppression and difficulty. Instead, he was more empowering them to go out, as he would tell the disciples, the apostles, go out to all the world and bring the good news. So he really calls us beyond what we're familiar. He would say to the disciples, "Follow me." And they did. And when you kind of think about what that meant, what they were leaving a life of familiarity, probably of comfort, though fishing for most of them was a very challenging way of life. Very difficult, hard work. They were at least familiar with it. They knew what it was. And he says he's going to make them fishers of men. And they followed him, probably not fully understanding, what does that mean? Fishers of men? I'd rather be fishers of fish. Fish don't talk back. People do. Fish are docile in a sense. You catch them, and they're kind of within your control. It's not like that with people because we have free will, and that certainly can get us into difficulty with our relationship with him and with one another. Baptism, I always instruct at the time when I conduct baptism, frees us from original sin, from the grasp or the grip of original sin it has on our whole, kind of breaks that grip so that we're able to live as children of God. It doesn't take away our humanity. It kind of graces, consecrates, lifts our humanity, makes it possible for us to live in a relationship with God. But the humanity is still there, the free choice is still, the free will is still there, and that can hinder our relationships with him and with one another. But as the word gospel means good news, there is that good news, and we can always be refreshed and renewed in that relationship. So that third question, who does Jesus say that you are, that I am? Just last Sunday, we had Good Shepherd Sunday, as it's called, the fourth Sunday of Easter. Jesus identifies himself as the Good Shepherd, as the sheep gate, as the one who tends the flocks, the one who is there as the bouncer, you might say, only letting into the enclosure, the sheepfold, the authorized shepherds. In ancient Palestine, the enclosure was made somewhat of a circle, but only with rocks. It wasn't like a big fence or anything. And various shepherds would come with their flocks, and through the gate there was an opening in that circle, and they would pasture the flocks in there while they would bring the flocks there, and there would be one shepherd at the gate as the gatekeeper, and he would let the shepherds come and go, and they would go to replenish their supplies or to rest or whatever, and then another one would come and take that person's place so he could go and take care of his business. But it was the thieves and the robbers and so forth that would kind of try to get in other places. They could easily do that. There again, it wasn't like the enclosure was greatly fortified, a big wall or anything. But the sheep would not recognize those intruders. They would only recognize by sound, particularly their particular shepherd. And he would come among them, maybe whistling, maybe humming, maybe playing something like a harmonica, maybe singing or just talking, and they would recognize those particular voices. And even though they were all commingled, then they would follow their particular shepherd, who would go ahead of them. And he would have scouted out the areas where the vegetation would be fruitful and plentiful and the water was not polluted. Sheep would sense instinctively where those things were, where plants and water were, but the shepherd would know which ones were best for them, so it would kind of guide them. I guess once you get sheep going, then they'll follow, but they're not real good at finding or leading it themselves. They have to be led. So the good shepherd is the one who anticipates the needs of others, anticipates their what is best, what is good. Our parents anticipated our needs when we were children, when we were infants. They provided for us in all of the daily grind of taking care of children, of feeding and bathing and clothing and all that kind of stuff. Whether it was the middle of the night or the middle of the day, whether it's convenient or inconvenient, whether healthy or sick, they were there to anticipate. And that's a good image, I guess, to call to mind as far as being a good shepherd. How can we be good shepherds for one another as adults? Anticipating, not micromanaging, not trying to get inside each other's brains, not trying to control one another, but anticipating. And to see someone coming or going, opening a door, greeting, being pleasant, being affirming, being complimentary, being thankful, a number of different ways that we can anticipate the needs and the good things of others. And that takes an attentiveness. We have to kind of have our eyes open. We have to be willing to look around, to see, to greet one another, to make eye contact. When I stand at the door of the church and greet people, if I get a hold of their hand, most adults will do it. Kids are a little bit reticent about it. Of course, they're at a lower height, but I'll hold their hand until they look at me to make eye contact. And because it's easy, even greeting people, you can be greeting, your hand is over here, but your eyes are here, and kind of, like the politicians. You're not really making eye contact. Kind of hold on a little bit and allow that. That's a beautiful form of communication with one another. Matthew Kelly speaks about the relationship that he had with his father. And there was that story that he told when his grandmother died, that he was kind of sad that day, and his father came and sat next to him and kind of asked him what was going on, or Matthew volunteered, "I don't believe in God." And his dad said something on the order, "But God believes in you." And he didn't scold him, he didn't reprimand him, he didn't challenge him and so forth. He kind of accepted that, to be able to accept people where they are. When I'm out and about, although it hasn't happened to me recently, but it would happen to me when I was still a pastor, I'd be in different places, and in a store sometimes, or just around the church, or at some function or whatever, and somebody, maybe the age of Mike, would say, "I used to be an altar boy." Now, we're going back a few years, before we had altar girls, now we refer to them as altar servers. I used to be an altar boy. And I learned after a while that that's code language. And at first it took me a while to kind of figure that out. And so then my response would be, "Why aren't you an altar boy now?" "I'm too old," would be their response. And I say, "If you want to learn to be an altar boy, I'll be glad to teach you. It's not limited to age. Many times it is young people, but it's okay to have older people as well." Well, their next statement would be, "Well, I'm really not going to church." So the statement, "I used to be an altar boy," means I used to go to church. I used to attend Mass. And my response would be, "Is there any particular reason that you're not doing that?" And sometimes there would be a reason. And sometimes there wouldn't be, other than they got lazy, they got disconnected for whatever reason, they got married, moved away, they went to college, who knows. And I said, then my response would be, "If there's something I can do to help you get reconnected, here's my card." So I don't believe in twisting people's arms. Conversation, and I believe that when people say those kinds of things, they're looking for a response. I don't think they're looking for a harsh response. I think they're looking for a compassionate response, a pastoral response, a good shepherd kind of response. And we can do that. But we got to be rooted in Jesus to be able to do that, to act as he would act. And how did he respond to people along the way? Usually with kindness, with goodness, with a gentleness. Think of the woman with the hemorrhage. She touches Jesus, thinking, if I just get close enough to touch him, I'll be healed. Now, probably the hemorrhaging had to do with menstruation, which they would not have had a medical understanding of that as we do today. And because it was a woman and there was some physical affliction there, she was at a distance, never would dare to get close enough to the rabbi to touch the rabbi, nor did children get near to touch the rabbi. And so Jesus said, "Who touched me?" He sensed that something had happened. It wasn't just rubbing elbows in a crowded environment, that there was more to it than that. And he found her, and it seems that she was kind of maybe trembling and so forth. He dealt with her very kindly and compassionately. That's the Good Shepherd. Matthew, the tax collector, Zacchaeus, these people that were typically alienated by the society. They were kind of kept at a distance. Their reputation preceded them. These are the ones that he spent time with. The woman caught in adultery. According to the law, she would be stoned. And they would have been justified, according to the law, to do that. How does he respond to her? Writes on the ground. We don't know what was written there. That's a mystery. But then that question, let the one without sin cast the first stone. And then he says to the woman, "Go and sin no more." Maybe he's the first man who ever spoke to her with dignity and respect. Maybe he's the first man that offered her some hope and encouragement rather than wanting to take from her for his own pleasure. simple things. And you and I can do that kind of stuff as well, to just be attentive to people. Not looking for our own satisfaction, our own needs and desires and wants and so forth, but what can we do for others? So that takes energy, that takes concentration, that takes an attitude on our part. Those of you from this parish or places where I've been, I frequently make reference to that simple gesture at the proclamation of the gospel where we trace a cross on our forehead. Lord, be in my mind. Lord, be in my mind. That's the official word. That's what we're supposed to say silently. In my mind, on my lips, in my heart, in my mind. I think to myself as I do that in my choices, my decisions, my thoughts, my priorities, but especially my attitudes. Because our attitudes color so much of how we respond to other people. How they look, how they appear, their build, their size, their color, their ethnicity, their language, whether they have tattoos and piercings and all those kinds of things. When I go walking, sometimes here in this neighborhood, and other places where I've been stationed, I just go walking for exercise and relaxation and so forth. I found, by and large, that the people who are most likely to engage first in some simple interaction, hello, hi, a smile or whatever, are African Americans. I don't know why, but whites, even if you say something, oftentimes there's still no response. But I found that blacks, by and large, will initiate some kind of response. What is that? Is that part of their culture? Is that something inborn there? I don't understand that. Maybe somebody could do a study on that. But I found that in malls and stores and business places, just in neighborhoods, strangers, even passers-by in a car. They're more likely to wave or gesture or something. So, just an observation, but I don't know what's behind that. But even, I'll notice if I'm coming over to Mass on Sunday morning, Father Helwig might have the early one and I have the 9:30, so I'm coming over as people are leaving. And good morning, good morning, good morning. Rarely do I get responses from people.
Wow.
Rarely. I'm just coming out of Mass. Go forth and proclaim the gospel. Go forth, the Mass is ended. We could say, well, they're kind of absorbed in what they're doing and where they're going next and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but. Now, if they recognize me, there's more likely that they'll say, good morning, Father. Sometimes they don't recognize me. Just kind of go, passing by. Why do we do that? And I guess we could get agitated by that, but I guess we have to use the style of Jesus and simply continue to do it. And hopefully, in time, there will be more of a change in that regard, as well as in places of business and stores and being in a line or whatever, being in an elevator. That is probably the most awkward place we're ever in. If there's a child there, that immediately is an opportunity for people to talk. But with adults, it's either looking at the numbers as though those are the numbers that you have on your Powerball ticket, or looking at the floor and counting the squares. Rarely, now it's an artificial kind of environment because you're squeezed into a small space. Typically we have space between us, kind of have boundaries. So it is kind of difficult. If I'm in an elevator at times, somebody's maybe pushing the buttons and I'll say, I'd like to go to housewares. But it's in a hospital. So at least lightens things up. Just kind of bring some levity to the situation, so kind of get people a little bit more interactive with one another. So, you know, that's, to me, is being the shepherd of kind of going out of ourselves and being radical. As chapter 8 points out, Jesus was a radical. And oftentimes in our thought of being a radical as being a rebel, being a little rambunctious. But the word radical has its roots in the word root, like radish. In canon law, they call it radish, the root of something, and kind of get to the bottom. And Jesus was one who was able to do that, really, to get through all of the claptrap, to get through all of the superficiality, kind of go to the heart of matters. Did it in a very non-threatening kind of way. He asked the disciples one time, "Who do people say that I am?" Well, that's easy to answer that question. Well, some say that you're the prophet, some say you're this person, some say you're that person, and some say this and some say that. So then that's the first piece of it. Who do you say that I am? Now we're getting very personal. They probably use that dynamic on purpose to be able to access, you know, kind of prime them a little bit. Who do you say that I am? Sometimes when I would meet with people in different environments, people are saying, and people are concerned, and people are upset. What people? What are their names? Well, I can't tell you that. Are you the spokesperson? Have you signed the release of privacy information? You know, I just went to my audiologist yesterday. I had to do that again, the HIPAA thing. So who has designated you as the official spokesperson for these people, this group? And sometimes we kind of say that. We can use those expressions. You know, people are talking. What people? Who are they? Give me names. Otherwise, what you're saying to me has no meaning. What do you say? And I would pose that question to people, and they'd be complaining about something. What is your opinion? And I found that impressing them a little bit, it would come down to maybe their opinion plus one other person, but it wouldn't necessarily be a group. They can kind of get lost in that group. So, you know, Jesus was able to kind of go beyond that surface kind of thing, and to really get to the truth, answering questions and answering them directly. I call to mind when I was probably in about 3rd grade, and I started school kindergarten when I was 4, so 3rd grade I would have been what, 7, 8, 7, I guess, 7 at the beginning of 3rd grade. And I asked my mom one day, I hope that I'm not, who's going to be watching this, children? I asked my mom one day, "Are you and Daddy Santa Claus?" And she simply said, "Yes." And I was not upset. I didn't call an attorney. Take her to court for lying all those years. I accepted that. My mind, the wires were connected enough in my brain to kind of come to that conclusion. I heard other kids talking, but I still believed up until that moment, and that Santa Claus was this person, and are you and Daddy Santa Claus? Yes. That was it. That was the end of the discussion. A week or so later, are you and Daddy Easter Bunny? Yes. A week or so later, are you and Daddy Tooth Fairy? Yes. She let me come to those conclusions myself. And there's also another cute story of a little boy who's playing with his buddies, and he comes in and says to his mom or his dad, you know, "Where did I come from?" And, oh, you know, sooner or later they knew they were going to have that conversation about sex and sexuality and everything. And so they go into this long explanation and terminology and everything else and so on and so forth. And the kid is kind of sitting there zoned out and says, "Do you understand?" And the kid said, "Yeah." And then the parent asked the question, "Why are you asking?" "Well, I was playing with my friends, and one said he was from Minnesota, and one said he was from California. And I wanted to know where I came from." So sometimes we need to clarify. We need to clarify the question in order to. So who do people say that I am? He was kind of looking for, some background there. So he would know how better than to respond to them. A true story is Bishop Sheen, Fulton Sheen, who was a great television personality when I was a kid. I didn't fully appreciate it. I was kind of young at the time. All I knew was that during that half hour, I had to be quiet. Well, at all through watching Fulton Sheen. But he told the story of himself that actually happened. He was in New York City one time, and he was on the subway. I mean, he's dressed clerically, and he's on the subway, and this fellow gets on the subway, and he comes in, and he's disheveled and unshaven and kind of dirty looking, and odor about him, and kind of staggering along. He plops down next to the bishop, and he, you can smell alcohol in his breath. And he's reading a paper, and then he puts it down, and he said, "Reverend, how does a man get diabetes?" And Fulton Sheen said to himself, "This is a good opportunity." So he went into this long diatribe of how eating poorly and too much alcohol and not exercising and diet and the whole thing, that can easily dispose one to getting diabetes. And then he said to the man, "Why do you ask?" The man said, "Well, I'm reading in the paper here that the Pope has diabetes." So we need to kind of clarify. We need to and that takes that interaction, so that the Good Shepherd is able and willing to do that. And in dealing with people, maybe they become lax in the faith, maybe they have an axe to grind of some sort. There's always a story behind that. Always a story. And kind of try to access that. And it's not typically it's not going to come by by arguing or being harsh, kind of taking them where they're at, as Matthew Kelly's dad on that day when Matthew announced he doesn't believe in God anymore, just simply said to him, "But God believes in you." And I've said to people many times, you greet them at church and you haven't been there for a while, through a funeral situation, they become distant. You're always welcome. Is there anything I can do to help you? I'd be happy to meet with you and to talk about it. Those kinds of interactions can often bear fruit. If nothing else, they've been listened to. If they've just been given some time, they've been offered some hope, and you might connect them with somebody, and you might be the connector. And why don't you, or encourage you to call this person, or this, or come to this. My first Christmas as pastor of St. Patrick in York, Christmas Eve, the first Mass, of course, is very crowded, and a parishioner was, who had recognized him, but I didn't know people's names at that point. But he kind of said to me, "I'm vested, ready to go up the aisle. Where are all these people the rest of the year?" I don't know. And I said to him, "Why don't you ask them?" And then I paused a little bit and I said, "In fact, what might be better? Why don't you see somebody that you haven't seen for a while? Somebody that you know, you recognize. You haven't seen that person lately. Nice to see you. Merry Christmas. Hope you have a wonderful holiday. How about next Sunday after Mass we go out for coffee together?" You never know. That simple kind of interaction can bear fruit and maybe help a person to rediscover Jesus, rediscover the church that he has given us, rediscover faith. It's frequent. I can't obviously tell you a lot of details about the sacrament of penance, but it's frequent that people will say that their faith is weak and their faith is lacking and their faith is waning and all. And I always say to them, if your faith was weak, you wouldn't be in confession. That takes tremendous faith. Yeah, there might be some questions and some struggles and some hesitation about things, but that takes tremendous faith to come before the priest, who is Jesus Christ, in that context, to confess your sins, to say your deep, dark, hidden secrets, and to trust in his love and mercy. And that's faith in action. And to be able to encourage that with others, to encourage others to seek out the sacrament of penance. There again, not beating them over the head with it, but just encouraging them to rediscover Jesus and to invite them. Meet me at the church at whatever time, or there's this group, there's this activity that's going on. How about coming with me? And being able to accept the answer, whatever the answer is. I encourage parents that are dealing with adult children that have become disconnected from the church. Not arguing, not nagging, not berating, and so inviting. But before we invite, we have to be willing to accept the answer, whatever the answer may be. Oh, Mom, all of that, and we get to stop. You don't take away my mothership and my fathership here. I'll always be concerned about your health and well-being, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Always, don't try to take that away from me. If you don't care to come, just say, I don't care to come. You might ask them next week or the next event, but not getting drawn into some kind of argument with them. Jesus wants to teach us to live an incredible life, a full life, a richer kind of life that was in chapter 6, and showed us how to do that with the way he conducted himself. Just had the gospel the other day. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And when he said that to Thomas, said, what's this way? Where are you going? How do we know this way? He said to them, you know the way. And then Thomas said, ooh, what app is that? Is that MapQuest or is that Google? Where's this way? I am the way. The way I conduct myself, the way I respond to people, that's the way. And by the Holy Spirit, we become then those good shepherds. We become those people who can teach others, to lead them, to guide them. But of course, we need to be taught. We need to be instructed. We need to be listening. We need to be attentive. We need to be good students, good members of the flock, and good leaders as well when the occasion presents itself. And allowing ourselves to be that connector, that person of inspiration, a person of hope. I guess that's it. Take chorus.
Take chorus.